So tonight I returned to the world of female-directed cinema and some of the movies that I did not get to last year that I knew I had wanted to see. This one was the notorious boxing Helena, which, believe it or not, I've been meaning to rent since I was like 13 or 14. I read about it in like TV Guide or some Time magazine. I don't know, something that I was reading around the year 2000 mentioned this movie, and then a few years later there was a joke in, oh, you know what, it was in probably in one of Joel Stein's columns or something. I used to read Joel Stein's columns a lot at that time, or it was in something, I don't remember. Point being, I meant to rent it, but it was like hard R, and so I never got around to renting it. And then when I was in high school, there was a mention of it in Gilmore Girls, and I was like, oh, that's that movie where she gets her limbs cut off, and I've been wanting to see it. And so, cut to like 15 years later, and I'm finally getting on it. And I gotta say, it's kind of an interesting film, especially if you know the background. So it's written and directed by Jennifer Chambers Lynch, who is David Lynch's daughter. She was 19 when she wrote the screenplay. 19. Let that sink in. Think about yourself at 19. Think about what interested you at 19. Especially if you were a teenage girl. Just think about it. Except for you guys who were men, you weren't teenage girls. You just have to project a little bit. By the time she made the film, I believe she was like 25 when she was filming it, so it'd been a few years. But she's still pretty young to be making, a feature film with a studio. So then there was a hubbub with the casting because Madonna dropped out, and then Kim Basinger dropped out, and then the studio sued Kim Basinger, and then she went bankrupt, and so you got a lot going in. It's sort of like anytime there's a lot of bad stuff within the background of a film, then when the film comes out, there's already going to be more of a lens on it. And so that can be unfair, especially to a film that is very strange and very left of center. And that's what we have in this film. It's got very interesting things to say about relationships and perhaps marriage, in terms of how it stifles female sexuality and female independence. And obviously, the main plot point in this film is the woman is slowly, like, her legs are amputated and then her arms are amputated, and it's a way for this lead character, Julian Sands, to have this woman that has rejected him. And there's a lot of conversation in the film sort of about and the psychology is not subtle. This is not a film where it's like everything is subtle, and she was young, so maybe she hadn't learned how to be subtle yet. I don't know. Does a film need to be subtle? Who knows? That's beside the point. The things that the Sherilyn Fenn character says to the man in terms of how she sees him and how he sees her as a woman and women in general is very interesting and very pointed and very much about the damning nature of fragile masculinity. And in 2016 and 2015, which we just ended, the fragile state of masculinity has been something we've been talking about a lot, because violence towards women comes from that. And the whole idea of be a man and act like a man, and if you were a real man, and all of that is very dangerous and very bad to the psyche. So is the idea of women being the objects of men, and women being an object, period, rather than a subject of her own life. So in the film, it's from the point of view of the creepy dude, but in doing that, you see how fucking creepy regular dudes can be, because to start with, the things he's doing are the things that are so romantic, like sending flowers and keeping something that she forgot so that she has to come see him, and things like that are often in romances as like, oh, isn't that sweet? And she turns it just enough to make it fucking terrifying. And the fact is, a lot of what boys are told are romantic towards women is fucking terrifying. And women just have been putting up with it, and or convinced that it's romantic, and it's fucking not. So as a piece of commentary, I think this film is really quite brilliant. The casting, like, I'm glad Madonna and Kim Basinger went away. I love Madonna, and obviously I love Kim Basinger, but Sherilyn Fenn is, like, exactly right for this role. She is so fucking good and so otherworldly and so in control and possession of her own oomph, if you will. It's a delight to watch. And Julian Sands is such a little worm. Ugh, he's just, like, so limp. But in a good way. Like, he's supposed to be that way. I read a few of the reviews, like contemporary reviews, so reviews from '93, that were like upset because the men were one-dimensional and pathetic, and I was just like, how many times have the women been one-dimensional and were even barely that in cinema? Okay, fuck you. But also, I don't think the men are actually that one-dimensional in terms of the way she's using them to have her point of view come across. I read this really sad quote that she did in an interview, where basically she said she did the best that she could. She had this crazy story. She was 19, and then she was working with all these adults, and she thought somebody would have, because she was basically a child, and she thought somebody would have told her, hey, maybe do this. And then she says, when the National Organization of Women slammed me, that was sort of the final straw. And then she says, it was no wonder I put my legs behind my ears and got pregnant. Not that I didn't love sex before then, but seriously, it was my child essentially who saved my life. So basically she, like, stopped making films and had a baby in reaction to how horribly lambasted this film was. Not that having a baby is a bad thing, but that was her way of coping. And I'm wondering if, like, a film, so this is her first film, right? And she's 25, and sometimes when you have your first film and you're 25, it's Citizen Kane or Boys in the Hood or, something along those lines, and it's revolutionary and you get praised. But a lot of people's first films are shit. And then they get to keep making films. But was it because she was a woman? Was it because they were saying it was nepotism? And look, she shouldn't have been a director, period? Or I'm not really sure what it was that made it so she didn't really get to ever make a film again. Like, many a director have won the Golden Raspberry for Worst Director and gone on to direct more, but probably all of those winners are men. So I'll leave that as it stands. That said, you should watch this movie. It's very fascinating. It's now 23 years old. No, yeah, 23 years old. 2 more years and we'll have a 25th anniversary screening of it, I guess. I don't know. My only complaint really about the film was the last, like, 20 minutes or so were a little hinky. But endings are really difficult, and if you don't have just the right ending, it's a problem. And, maybe she was rushed, I don't know. But otherwise, and it's got a great cast. It's Sherilyn Fenn and Julian Sands and Bill Paxton, who's always good, Kurtwood Smith in a very early role, and none other than Mr. Art Garfunkel, always good when his hair shows up in a movie. So I suggest you watch this movie. Come up with your own opinion. It's not as terrible. It's actually not terrible. It's got a lot of really interesting ideas. I feel like people get really stuck on technical execution. And as a big fan of Fat Girls, I can tell you that the movie Fat Girls, I can tell you that sometimes an interesting idea or a compelling performance can trump technical execution, and because people will get better, So I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of Lynch's filmography. She has a few other films that she's made. she took time off, obviously, but then starting in 2008, she's made 4 films. One of them hasn't come out yet. And she's done a handful of television work too, which is good. So it's sort of like a happy ending. She also wrote The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, which is still in print and I have not read. And as a huge Twin Peaks fan, I feel that I need to splurge at some point and get that for myself. So this was Jennifer Chambers Lynch's boxing Helena from 1993, and you should check it out.